The Lies of Locke Lamora is a fantasy novel by Scott Lynch that I just finished reading today, and I have some thoughts. So, enough thoughts that I figured I would go ahead and share them with you in a bit of a longer form video. So, this type of story, I guess I should start with a little bit of a introduction in a way to people who don't already know the plot pretty well. The Lies of Locke Lamora follows, obviously, the titular character, Locke, and his small band of thieves referred to as the Gentleman Bastards, who are not quite Robin Hood-esque thieves. They're not giving back to the poor, but they do have sort of a code around how they perform their heists, their operations, and they really only focus on stealing from the noble class of the city that they come from, Camor, which is basically like evil Venice, which is the ideal setting for a story like this. So right off the bat, already love the world, the setting. It just very, very interesting and evocative. I think there's a lot of things about this story that I really enjoyed, and that in a way is surprising. It's not really a type of story I would expect myself to like. And so I think that says some very positive things about the writing as a whole, that I was able to really get a lot out of it, despite it being a little outside of, what I normally enjoy. In terms of recommending it to others, I do have to kind of give the caveat or warning. This book is pretty R-rated. Most things that you would expect to see in an R-rated movie you're gonna see here. Lots of language, violence, torture, not a lot of actual sex or sexual acts, although there is a lot of sexual talk, and especially sexual insults. The people in this story are very rude, which fits the theme and the setting, but it is something that you might want to watch out for. That I think that is one of the reasons that this book doesn't line up with the kind of things that normally appeal to me the most. Not that I do enjoy, like I like stories that are willing to go all the way to depict real serious themes. So I'm not inherently against any of that kind of stuff when handled well. But there's a degree to which Locke Lamora kind of revels in it that did at times make me a little uncomfortable. The swearing was maybe a little bit more frequent than I would have personally preferred. There are multiple gratuitous torture scenes, which I just don't. I don't know why. Like, I can handle all kinds of violence, but torture and like maiming is just. It doesn't make me feel good. And again, it's not supposed to, but it is something that I personally can go without. But I think the thing that this story did the best for me, the point that was the most overall impressive, was kind of the scenarios. Like, my predominant emotion throughout the entire story was, oh crap, how are they going to get out of this one? And that works. Like, repetitively, the characters are getting into worse and worse situations, digging themselves deeper and deeper into really nasty holes. And, well, some of it is out of their control, but don't want to spoil too much yet. But the seeing how they, the Gentlemen Bastards, figured out their kind of schemes to work their way out of these situations, that was the most compelling part of the plot. And it's really like a lot of the plot. And so that's, I think, a big part of why I was able to enjoy the book as much as I did, because so much of it is this just really fundamentally compelling idea of, here's a really tricky scenario, here's all of the interesting mind games we're going to play to work our way out, right? There were other things that I did really like, and other things that I took issue with that are a little bit more spoilery. So at this point, if you haven't read the book and you're interested, you should probably stop watching, go check it out from your local library, pick it up from bookseller somewhere, whatever, however you want to read it. Because if what I've talked about appeals to you, it is almost definitely worth your time. And now, if I can have a moment more of your time, those of you who have read the story, okay, where to even start? I think, okay, so the other aspect of the story that was probably my favorite part personally, just because it's a really interesting concept, is the fact that our main character is not just a thief, but specifically a priest to the god of thieves, a sort of a secret god of the pantheon in this world, who most people don't know about, or at least don't actively worship. And the story isn't heavily focused on him being a really devout religious person, but it's there. Those aspects of the story are present throughout, as they talk frequently about death offerings and occasionally say little prayers to their patron god. And there are other ways, obviously, in more in the ending of the story where that becomes more relevant. But just the whole idea, it is difficult to make a character who is a thief seem legitimately heroic, right? Most stories have to find some way to work around it, sorry, like with, the situation with something like Robin Hood, where he is stealing only from the rich and giving to the poor. So it's like there's a nobility to what he's doing. A lot of heist stories will have some reason to make our main characters pulling off this heist feel a little bit more legitimate in our eyes, because taking things that don't belong to you, especially from people who need them, is not an admirable trait. And we generally, heroes are characters that we want to admire in some way. Now, Locke Lamora isn't the kind of character who is, the narrative is strongly focused on him being a hero, but there are ways in which he is, and the idea of him having this religious reason to be a thief gives that sort of sense of legitimacy that he needs in order to feel like not just a common criminal, right? So that kind of twist on your typical sort of roguish phantom thief archetype character, who are often pretty appealing already, was a really interesting way to take his character in a direction that would make it easier for the audience to root for him, especially with, how nasty a lot of the characters in this story can be. So that was my favorite part of the entire book. My least favorite part was probably the torture. But after that, I would have to say that there was a little bit lacking to me in the sort of the ending of the story. And I don't say this to mean I really disliked the ending. I didn't think it was bad. I thought it did a pretty good job of giving all of our kind of major plot threads a kind of resolution that they needed. And maybe the issue that I have stems in at least some degree from the fact that I don't really like revenge stories either. Well, I find revenge stories to be very interesting, but I don't like revenge. I tend to be a little bit more of a proponent of forgiveness, even toward people who have hurt us. That's coming a little bit from my religious background. I just don't think that eye for an eye mentality does anyone any good, and so following Locke's revenge quest at the end of the story just wasn't as compelling to me. But aside from that, I think that there were a couple of things that could have been a little bit more interesting in a different world, and they're small, they're minor, they're not big enough things for me to say, oh, this massively impacts my enjoyment of the book. But they're there, and they include things such as Caparaza, or the Grey King, the villain of the story. I didn't really find him to be all that interesting in the end. Like, again, the scenarios were good. His plan, his scheme, the way it played out was really interesting. But him as a character, we spent a while building up an idea of, we don't know who he is, it's going to be some kind of a big reveal, and I wouldn't necessarily have wanted to find out that he was, Father Chains, who was alive this whole time or anything. I don't think that would have worked. But the reveal of who he actually is felt a little underwhelming to me. Not to mention that his motivation, being one of revenge, doesn't really make him stand out from the other characters in the story. We have multiple other revenge plot lines throughout this, with Kappa Barsavi and Locke both toward the Grey King, and maybe there's an interesting parallel there, but the fact that all of these characters were just after revenge, and their resolution generally just seems to be either they get it or they don't. I just felt like there could have been something more interesting there. On top of that, we also have another character who I would have liked to see some more interesting stuff from, because she basically doesn't appear in the story at all. In fact, she doesn't. she's only mentioned, and decreasingly so over the course of the story, and that is, I believe her name is Sabbatha, the one member of the Gentleman Bastards, who is a woman who has left on some, I don't think it's exactly clear where she is. In fact, she disappeared because they're trying to, they don't know. The main characters don't even know. And we know basically nothing about her. She's mentioned. We know that she exists. We know that hypothetically she has some kind of skills that are useful to their group, and that she is the one who has Locke's heart, right? He's clearly in love with her. I wanted to know, like, she didn't even necessarily have to appear in this book. And I realize that this is the first in a series. There's ample opportunity for her to appear later, but the amount that she's brought up at the beginning to only entirely fade from the story without really any exploration of who she is, what her relationship is with the main characters, despite the amount of flashbacks we get, felt a little bit like we were leaving Chekhov's gun on the table to me. So some of those things, with the ending and the resolution with some of the characters, I could have stood to see some more of them to make them a little bit more interesting. I think our main characters got so much interesting development. By the end of the story, I was totally interested and totally behind following Locke and John Tannen, who was probably my favorite character in the story. Hard to pick among the main cast, especially with like how strong Locke's personality is. But John is just such a good, loyal, slightly murderous friend, and I really enjoyed that from him. Bug, I actually really liked. But of the sort of broader supporting cast, the most interesting characters were among the peers of Comor. Characters like the Spider and the Don and Donya that the Gentleman Bastards are pulling their current scheme on. They had some interesting stuff going on. Among the criminal underworld that the story is ostensibly focused on, I didn't find a lot of the supporting cast characters to be all that interesting. Not including the ones who didn't appear at all, because I did find her interesting. I just wanted to know why, right? But all that aside, my overall experience with this story as I got to the end, despite a few misgivings, was quite positive, a lot more so than I would normally expect from a story like this. And it was really helpful to me because I am currently working on writing a novel that explores some somewhat similar themes, especially with the sort of setting of following roguish characters in the criminal underworld of a city. And so there was a lot for me to learn and gain from this. A lot that obviously I'm not going to just directly grab, but when I'm working on stories, I like to read stories that are similar, because it helps me to kind of get in the right mindset, the right place to kind of explore that sort of world, right? I want to have the kind of tone down that I want. I want to have the kind of setting. And reading a story like this, I picked it because of the book I'm working on, and I don't think I could have made a better choice. So that's my my overall feelings on The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This recording has gone on actually quite a bit longer than I expected, but I don't have the time or mental energy to edit videos that I'm posting, so it's probably just going to all go up unedited with all the filler words and everything. So if you decided to stick with me all the way through to the end of this, I'm extremely grateful. I know I didn't accommodate your attention span the way that a lot of YouTube does, but I'm genuinely happy that you were interested in hearing my opinion, and I'm interested in hearing yours. If you want to drop anything down in the comments, and we can talk. So, until next time.